How do you know when to hire? And then for what position do you hire? And how do you begin the process of expanding your team? It feels that when any conversation begins with a question about hiring or a team or expanding your business, it's only the tip of the iceberg because then we can answer one question and suddenly there's 25 more that come along with it. It is a big topic that I'm very excited to dive into today with Maddie and Kristen Steuber from Steuber Travel Group. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining me again.
Of
Thanks for
course. Thanks
having
for
us.
having us.
Here, so Instagram tells me that you've recently expanded your team again. And I say Instagram because even though I see you both regularly and talk to you regularly, I'm still opening up Instagram like, well, they told me they were hiring and here, yep, they're announcing it like they weren't joking. So for anyone listening who isn't fully up to speed on your team, and I feel like I still have to take notes to like keep everyone straight, and because I don't know them personally, so it's hard for me to like keep names and everything straight. Can you share with us your current team structure? How
Yes.
big is your team? What are everyone's roles and responsibilities? And then like what's the mix of ICs and employees? Because you've got both.
Yes. I'm going to try and describe it in the org chart format. So hopefully that helps
Okay.
who are visual because that's how I visualize it.
Okay.
But Steuber Travel Group, the brand is at the top, the main circle. We have two like branches coming off that main circle. One side is the IC arm of the business, and the other side is the in-house side of the business. Under
Okay.
our IC side, we have three ICs, about to be four. And on the in-house side, we have two pillars. We have a like sales and relationship, or excuse me, we have a sales pillar, which is me. And then we have a relationship pillar, which is my mom. And then we have
Okay.
support staff underneath us to do those pillars. So for me, if I'm driving the sales pipeline, I have an operations manager, her name is Katie, and a travel coordinator, her name is Megan.
Okay.
Underneath the relationship side for my mom, she has an office coordinator, her name is Maddie. She's amazing, and she is like if you were in a brick and mortar office, like managing all of us, making sure trainings are scheduled, making sure data gets entered in the right spot, making sure calendars for team meetings are updated, keeping us kind
So
of like on the
she's technically reporting to Kristen, but she's the whole team is engaging with her. She's supporting the whole team.
correct. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's go back over to the IC part of the
Yeah.
org chart for a second. Um, does your idea of an IC leg of the business match mine in that the ICs are building their own book of business? That you're
Correct.
not passing, like clients aren't coming into Steuber Travel Group and you're giving them leads. They are building their own book of business.
They're building their own book. A lot of them have their own book. We do provide leads on a discretionary basis, but the
Okay.
real mentorship and goal for the IC side is that they're not relying on our leads. They build their own book, and all of them have.
Okay. And so then compared to the in-house team, are you the only in-house advisor that is directly speaking with clients about like a new inquiry trip design, or do you have it and then you have your support, or do you have someone else on the in-house team that is like taking client calls and planning trips?
So the former, it was just me for the last 4 years.
Okay.
In Actually, in 10 days, when our operations manager returns, she's transitioning from a part-time position into a full-time, and we're going to do a little like segue into her being an in-house STG advisor,
Okay.
which will be amazing for her. We're going to slowly give her in-house STG leads, and the goal is that next year she's working entirely on her own, and I'm kind of now working with our travel coordinator, which is why we needed to hire a coordinator to allow Katie to step into this in-house advisor role. But that was probably
Right.
6 months too early, if I'm being really honest.
So I have my brain's going in 10 different directions already, so I hope I don't forget all these questions. Um, you have two people supporting you right
Correct.
now
Yep.
on the sales side. Okay. So for the for the two that are supporting you, was it always the plan to have two supporting you, or did you bring in the second because you realized the first was going to be transition into more of a client facing role, and so
Um,
it's a transition period, or you
we
always wanted to?
So my law background plus Lindsay and Jeremy's experience with Jet Set and the lessons that they shared with us led us to a place where we needed to mitigate risk, because truly I'm in a phase of life where if Katie stepped away from the business right now, the business would suffer, the client experience would suffer. So we needed to hire a second person purely because if something ever happened to Katie and she didn't want to work for us anymore, I would need support. So that was the first thing, was like mitigating risk. The second thing was to help Katie and support Katie in her goals to continue to grow with us. We needed to free up some of her time so that she could sell, but I still need support, and she is also going to
Yep.
need support. So that position was also needed for that reason, for her to grow and step into the to an in-house
So
advisor.
you knew that that was kind of in the trajectory for her, that she was interested in going in that direction, and
We did, to be honest, we had a different direction in mind for her. And I think she did too, like a year and a half ago. But when she covered for me for maternity leave, I think a lot of light bulbs went off and she was really enjoying the
cool.
sales and the one-on-one with the clients in a way she didn't expect. So
Mm.
we made adjustments for sure.
So now that she's going to start becoming more client facing, you're back to only having one support technically. Are you looking ahead, maybe not immediately, but are you going to try to fill that back into this kind of tripod model of having two people support you?
Yeah. So I feel like we hired Megan probably 6 months before we're really, really, really going to need her. And she knows that. She came on board knowing she was going to be ramped up. And I think once Megan gets to a place, maybe 6 months from now, 8 months from now to a year, where she's like rocking and rolling, then we look at hiring again. So we're always like going to be 4 to 6 months before we really need someone, if that makes sense. And there are some cons that come with that, because your payroll is heavy, if I'm being really
Yeah.
honest.
But I
So,
think we should, I was going to say, I think we
yeah, go
should
ahead.
also clarify for anyone listening, these are not full-time employees. Katie was,
That was where I was going
yeah,
to go next. Yeah.
yeah. Katie for the longest time was more than half-time, more than part-time, not quite full-time. She is going to be full-time. Maddie for the first 6 months was Maddie, the other Maddie, who supports me a little bit more. She
You
was,
guys are doing so great helping us keep this straight.
she
I mean, seriously.
um, and one of our ICs is Kristen, and everyone's last name begins with an H except ours. It's a crazy little team. But Maddie was part-time, and we bumped her to full-time to support me and the things that Madeline needs her to do. So it's kind of like we start with this part-time position and then build it into a full-time position.
So I've done this as well with someone who's currently on my team, and it worked out for that person to kind of start slow, and then I gave her the trajectory of like, by this date, my I want this to be 30 hours a week, but we're going to slowly ramp up to that, and that was okay for that person's situation. Is that kind of like how are you recruiting and hiring in a
Mm.
way that is, I want you to come on part time now, but I'm eventually going to need you full time? And like finding people that are open to that, that are flexible to that, both time wise and financial wise. Like, how do you navigate that? Is is it not as hard as it sounds, or is it actually kind of part of your interviewing process to make sure that that's going to work?
I think it's not as hard as it sounds, but also just like we have client segments, I kind of have an idea of who I'm looking for in terms of a position and maybe previous positions that they've held. So for us, former teachers, military spouses is a really good network. You've got really ambitious people who are kind of confined to where they can work, myself included. I fit that mold. And then former teachers are oftentimes a little burnt out from that industry because they were expected to work all these crazy hours and weren't compensated fairly. And so that's kind of who I've somewhat looked for, but we don't confine it to that. I think in the interview process, we are very clear and very specific. The goal is this many hours, which I somewhat lowball so that they don't feel,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying? They don't feel locked down per se. And then I
Yeah.
tell them what we're striving for and get them on board with that. But I'll be honest, I mean, really young people who have not held any sort of corporate position out of college or any sort of like traditional position, I'm always a little bit hesitant on because I'm afraid that this is just a stepping stone and they're going to want to go
Yeah.
elsewhere eventually. And so we've crossed some of those candidates off our list, if I'm being super transparent, even though they were
Mhm.
amazing, even though they on paper were perfect.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's something that you have to consider and think about upfront,
Yeah.
and then go into the interview process with that information and sharing and being open about that. Because there are some people who never want more than part time, and so
Yeah.
that's not going to work. And there are some people who need full time from day one, and that's not going to work.
Yeah.
But I think that in conversations that I've had with other travel advisors who are kind of getting started on this hiring expansion journey, I've heard a sense of hesitancy or fear that, like, well, how on earth could you find someone who will work part time now and full time in 6 months? And actually, you've experienced it multiple times now. I've experienced it. Those people are out there, but you
100%.
have to go into the process with that, like, fully upfront from the beginning.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we do this in more areas than just this. Like we think people want a certain thing. We think they want to be an IC. We're almost hesitant to put them in an assistant role because for sure when they see the amount of commission checks coming in, they're going to want to be an IC. And even that hasn't been our experience. I mean, we showed Katie everything, every side of the business, and Katie was set to be an IC at like the 7-month mark of working with us. And then we had a conversation when we saw each other in New York, and she was like, I don't want to do what you do. I don't want to be running my own business. And I see all of the aspects that come with running your own business. And these are the parts of the business that I love. And this is where I want to work. And so, the employee model is not even as unattractive as I think some people think in this industry.
I agree. I have found in my experience hiring and interviewing as well, there are so many people who are eager and excited to be a part of something, and to not necessarily have that burden of being the CEO or the owner of the business, or the one wearing all of the hats. There are a lot of those people out there.
I agree completely.
Okay, I'm still looking at your imaginary org chart here above my head. Um, so you talked about hiring 4 to 6 months kind of ahead. Can we dive into, like, what that really means for you? And when you say 4 to 6 months, like, are you looking at rejections? Are you looking at, like, data in your business where you're seeing, like, leads are increasing from quarter to quarter, but they're not where we need them to be to hire, but we can see that that's the trajectory? Like, what are you actually looking at to make the decision of, now is 4 to 6 months too early, but in 4 to 6 months we're going to need this person? Like, can we dig into what that means for you a little bit more?
Yeah, mom, we chime in because we've had this conversation so many times. But like what it traditionally looks like is end of year, we're reviewing our sales, we're seeing what the revenue was, we're seeing how we spent the revenue. And this year, I was like, we could have spent the revenue a little bit smarter. And there's enough here to fund 2 more part-time positions if
Ooh,
we
tell me more. What does that mean? You could have spent the revenue a little bit smarter.
so like we spent it a lot on travel. There were a lot of we had without getting too much into it, we had paid someone for 6 months who really wasn't the right fit for our business,
Okay.
and it wasn't a good match, and that revenue I could see being spent, those same hours could be divided into 2 positions that slowly ramp up, and if we could, increase our sales by 30% to, 40%, we could fund both of those positions at a full-time basis. So it was like, okay, this pool of money spent on this position didn't work out, but that position could be divided into 2 part-time positions. And this amount of money that we spent on airfare and mistakes that we made in our own personal travel because we were changing plans and not being, strategic, we can plan our own personal travel a little bit better and spend less money.
Sure.
Then it was more of like a conversation. What do you say, Mom? Between the two of us of like, do you feel comfortable with this payroll amount? And my mom
Mhm.
kept saying like, I think we can do it. And I'm like, I think we can do it. I think we can do it. We need to hit this many planning fees to carry that sort of payroll. And so, Mom, do you have anything to add? I'm like,
Yeah, I think nothing more than just really looking at your numbers, making sure, like, really diving into, are our commissions where we want them to be? Is there a way to work the business to increase commissions? What can we do to increase our planning fees? Like, how can we get, that's marketing. Can we get, more people onboarding? That's more planning fees. And um,
Mhm.
again, just looking at where everything is spent. And is that a wise use of those dollars, or can we take some of that and allocate it towards hiring?
Right. It is a really interesting conundrum to go from I'm starting my business literally earning nothing because that's
mm,
how we all start to then generating enough revenue that you actually have enough to not manage it wisely.
yeah,
Yeah,
And that is like, that's a really awesome problem to have. But also, if it's ignored, so much money can be wasted.
yeah,
And it's so, so, so important to like really sit down and go through everything and be like, it's not, it's in my mind, it's less about should I have done this or should I have done that or was that a good decision? And it's more about I invested here. Did I get the ROI
yeah.
on that investment?
yeah,
100%. 100%. And that's what I mean by like that position just wasn't the right fit for our company. The ROI was not there. And actually, it was hurting us tremendously because it cost us more hours for me to go back and correct
Hmm.
work. It cost our operations manager more hours. So, like, when I was looking at that number, I was also thinking this number is a heck of a lot higher because what's not in it is the hours I spent on fixing stuff and
Yeah.
Katie spent on fixing stuff. And all of that, is going to go down if we have the right people in place. And now when I onboard people, and maybe this is like a little harsh and I should probably ask people how it lands, but I say to them, part of the reason you're being hired is to bring my hours down, to bring Katie's hours down so we can sell more. I need
Hmm.
my hours on this
Yeah.
to come down so that I can go sell X, Y, and Z. And in doing that, I mean, I'd have to ask how it landed, but I feel like we've got some go-getters that are coming in the door that are like, I hope I'm not taking up too much time. Like, how am I doing? And I'm like, yes, this is what I want for our team, you know?
Yeah. I think it well, I mean, you should ask your team how that lands because we're kind of in a bubble that both
Yeah.
of us could potentially be saying that. But I have found that being pretty open with the team about like, this is the goal, this is the purpose of what you're doing, this is what it enables me to do. I just had this conversation with my assistant, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, looking at our numbers of what we have on the books for 2024 travel. I told her, I said, this is higher than it's ever been before, and this is thanks to you.
That's awesome.
I I can't do this by myself. I could have never done this by myself. And that meant a lot to her to know that that's how she was contributing to our team.
The culture piece, I think, is so important. And something my mom and I do is we're very honest and we tell people where our sales are at as a whole company. We're very transparent. And I think it in some ways motivates the team too to be like, wow, like we contributed to this, like we're part of this. Mom, what do you think?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. But if I could just maybe jump back a second and go back to that
Yes,
planning
please.
process of,
Yeah.
looking 4 to 6 months ahead.
Hmm.
Part of that process is a leap of faith. Part of it is, "Okay, I'm going to
I
on."
really was hoping you were going to tell me it was straight data, Kristen. I need data.
I know, but when you look at it, part of it is, "Okay, I'm gonna take on this person. I looking at my numbers, I feel confident that we have the room to do this." But then it's also that taking that leap of faith, but understanding that in doing this, it opens up the doors to more sales and, the ability to do more work and therefore.
So, so I'm asking for a friend. The friend is me. Um, I'm in this situation right now that my assistant has been with me almost a year, and I have given her responsibility of a large majority of the process. Like, it's happening, you guys. It's really beautiful. And this is all thanks to so many conversations with you and with Brianna and with so many other like advisors who are always just so open and willing to share how they approach this. And I'm seeing that like trips are being closed faster, and the that I have more time, or I have a whole lot less stress. Like, I'm actually finishing the day at a reasonable hour. I'm working much less on weekends, and all of these things are great. What I'm starting to now ask myself and just wonder, and this is because I have brain space to ask myself questions, is now that there's more space, is a larger volume of inquiries going to continue to come in on their own? Or like, how much time and effort and energy do I now need to shift to marketing and actually like more proactively getting out there to bring in the inquiries?
We are having the same exact conversation, like literally 3 days ago. And I go back to
Can
what
you just like tap me into your office, your stand up meetings?
yes, I'll just add you to the Slack channel. Um, Kate Sullivan has always said for a long time, and I think for whatever reason, it clicked for me this week of like, I'm the face of the company. I'm the one that brings business in. And I have always kind of thought that in maybe in theory, but never really in practice. And so in our marketing this week, we did a little test. I did 3 very vulnerable, very honest posts with my face.
Loving the content coming out of your Instagram right now. I was going to message you last night, the Italy one. I
Yeah,
was like, can I cop? This is so great. Can I do this? And I loved that you shared, like, I could hear your passion in your voice, and yet you didn't say the name of any of the places you were at. So I was like, I have to have Maddie plan this trip because I don't actually know where she is.
really the secret sauce.
I
And
loved it.
it's funny you say that because in Asana, I made what I'm doing into a template because we're going to have the team kind of replicate what I'm doing. But I was like, don't give away the secret sauce. Anyway, my point being, our
I
little
loved it.
test, fascinating. 6 leads generated from that type of.
Stop.
No, I'm so
Come
I'm
on.
not upping these numbers, right? I'm not peacocking there. We're really sick. And what was so fascinating was 2 were honeymoons. I mean, this was like I was purely talking to client segment 1, honeymoons, and the rest were clients, repeat clients who were like, "Oh, I forgot. Like, we can use you to go to the one hotel in Miami, and we can work with you to go back to our honeymoon destination, Como Parrot Cay, where we went 2 years ago." And the light bulb clicked. I was like, holy cow, my free time that is being, freed up because of our support staff needs to go to this. And what's unfortunate is only 2 out of the 6 were like cold leads, new leads, because I want
Mhm.
that number to go up so that we can
Yes.
give it to Katie, give it to our ICs. But
I
the
think that's what I need too. Is like my business is 99% repeat and referral, which is so incredible. But also to if I'm really going to support one assistant and potentially a second, which is what I'm now looking ahead and preparing to do, cold leads have to increase.
I think so, but I've also noticed something with our book this year. We have, um we're down marginally, very slightly sales-wise, but we're up revenue-wise. And I think that's because we're booking higher volume, higher commissionable product, and we have fewer cold leads, which is why I'm doing a big push for these
Mhm.
honeymoon clients. But I do think there's something to be said for your assistance and support staff allows you to dig deeper into your higher volume clients and increase the sales revenue on those, which is a
Mhm.
metric I feel like is very difficult to track. So I'm kind of just talking from like theory. It feels this way. But
Kristen, you are managing an entirely different side of the business with relationships and education and training and all this kind of stuff. So, when you're looking at planning 4 to 6 months out and making sure we're bringing on these people, but we also have to make sure that the revenue increases. I mean, from your side of the business, what are you considering and what are you looking to do in order to support the growth that is really needed to support an additional payroll?
I think on my side of the business, my side is really to support the ICs and the in-house staff that we have. I don't necessarily know that we've talked about bringing on more staff to directly support me. And the person that does support me, a lot of what she does is due to my technical inabilities to do all these modern AI things. But she's incredibly helpful turning what I do into something to share with the team. But that is an interesting thought. I don't think we've thought about growing my side of the business. But I would imagine as our team grows and as they need more support and more education, there's only so many webinars I can attend. There's only so many places that I can go and, lunches I can attend and that sort of thing. So that's an interesting thought and idea for our future.
I think the big part is like our IC arm of the business. Obviously, we need to add a lot of value for them to continue to want to stay. And I think anyone who's growing an IC model, you're naive if you think that they're going to stay forever. They're not going to stay forever. And sometimes they'll move on for their own personal growth. And we want to support that, just as Lindsay and Jeremy have supported us in the same way. But in the meantime, we want to make it nice and cozy and wonderful. You don't want to leave. And so part of, I think, my mom's role is, one, as Kate Sullivan always says, being the face of the company with partners. When she's going to these trade shows, which again frees up my time to sell. So even her position has this connection to sales in that way, but then also making it really fun and wonderful and having a database of training materials and resources and know before you go guides and dining guides. And you need this thing. Our Rolodex has 3 different contacts and it's all here, building up that side of the business for the ICs. But then also, I mean, this, a little bit selfishly of the business, we want these things to be attached to the brand so that if we
Mhm.
ever, 10, 15, 20 years from now want to sell the brand, there are some proprietary things that she's developed that are now attached to the brand.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, I have so many questions. So, can you talk to me about your decision to do both an IC arm and an employee arm? Because I'm super jaded by the IC experience that I had, and I can tell everyone I'm open to sharing all the reasons that it went wrong. Like, here, let me give you a list of all the things not to do if you want to build a team of ICs. And so now I'm full on like employee. If anybody asks me like if they want to grow their team, I'm like, hire an employee.
Yeah.
So like maybe a little bit aggressively. You have both.
Yeah.
So and now you're going to have soon a client facing in-house advisor.
Mhm.
Does the training and the experience for an IC on your team and an in-house advisor on your team, do they look the same or similar?
No. I mean, they're similar. They're definitely similar. Don't get me wrong. But we spend a lot of time on training the ICs. Like that first week is dedicated to like, here's how you run and build a book of business. Whereas
Okay.
with an in-house advisor, I'm going to give you that book. So we don't need to cover that. You don't need to learn, how to
Yeah.
LC or set up an S corp or how to speak to
Hmm.
client segment 1 because I'm going to do that for you.
It's
Um,
done. Uh-huh.
it's done. I think where it's different is like both of them are taught the sales pipeline, the client life cycle experience, what we strive for as a brand. But ultimately, the IC side of the business, you can take as much or as little of my client life cycle and my client experience as you want. Whereas in-house, we are doing it the way that Kristen and I have developed because it's worked. So at least for our book of business.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
similar, but I'd say there are some pretty substantial differences too.
And I
Mhm.
also think the model that we've put together, that in-house advisor, I think is our hope is going to grow into that role, starting as a coordinator, understanding all of the stuff that goes into building a trip, eventually to become client facing. Whereas an IC comes to us hopefully with all of those skills, obviously we're going to tweak, we're going to help them build a business more, but they hopefully have some idea of how travel works. And if they don't, it's really their responsibility to use the tools that we will provide to learn that on their own.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
to go back to your question though of like how did we decide to do both? It was a very spirited conversation between Kristen and I for probably a year because I forget we both swapped. We both had stances that were opposite of what they are now, or were,
Interesting.
but we basically went back and forth where I kept saying, okay, let's play this out. Our exit strategy 15, 20 years from now, we grow, sell, merge, whatever that looks like. We're stepping back from the company. How can we step back from a company that's purely filled with ICs because all those ICs could leave? They're not attached to the brand. So if somebody were to purchase that, do they want to purchase that? But on the flip side, she and I would need to sell $6-7 million worth of business before we could really bring on the same, full-time employee staff to support, funding all of their lead pipelines. And that's really hard. I mean, that would require so much time and energy. And we don't really have the time or the energy to go 150% to grow us to 6 million to then bring on support staff. So where we landed was a hybrid model because part of the IC revenue that we generate, we just pour right back into the business and it funds in-house positions. So the IC model was a way to achieve our goal a little bit faster. And then in talking with other people, we kind of learned IC models are attractive. When you have two different revenue streams, it does make you attractive as a business to purchase someday. And I don't know if we're going to sell. I'm not saying we're going to sell, but like our exit strategy high level was step back from the business in the same capacity that we are right now. So in order to get there, we want to be attractive to all opportunities, which could mean potentially being purchased. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it was.
Well, I'm surprised to hear you say that the IC part of the IC revenue is supporting the in-house team because I think what's been a big challenge that I always talk to everyone about who thinks like, oh, I'm going to bring on an IC and make a whole bunch of money is like generally if ICs are starting from square one, no money is made for anyone for 18 to 24 months.
100%. That is incredibly true. So if we're looking at our three ICs, I'd say 30% of not, that's not, I shouldn't talk in percentages because that does not going to make sense. But basically one IC, the earning revenue we make on one of those three ICs is being invested back into the business to support however many things we choose to invest in.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take the others, time purely because they need to be with us for at least a year to bring commissions in for a year in order for us to potentially make any sort of revenue. And our margins on ICs are incredibly small. Like what we make on our ICs versus every other aspect of
Mm-hmm.
the business. I mean, you're really pulling from those 3 or 4 ICs for like one half of an in-house position. So when I say that, I'm not saying
Right.
like one IC is funding one in-house position. That's not at all what's happening.
Right. Mm-hmm. It it's just a lot of energy and time
Yeah.
into ICs because 18 to 24 months of your time and energy and resources to support an IC before financially they're supporting the team in any way takes a lot from your potential selling, theoretically.
Does. I would argue though on the flip side, and this is where I have not changed my stance on this. People who want to have ICs need to deeply love people, deeply love being a part of a team, and be fulfilled and in some ways paid by having a team. Because I would say the contributions that Nikita, Rachel, and Kristen make to our team culture, I couldn't put a dollar amount on. Like, it's very
Mhm.
clear. Everybody gets along so well. Everybody helps everybody. So Nikita's insight on Mexico and Kristen's insight on Turks and Rachel's insight on dining, there's something inherently valuable about that because it does speed up their sales in a way, and sometimes mine too. But it's hard. I mean, if you're not paid in the same way, like if building a team doesn't
Yeah.
give you like inner peace and joy and money in your mind, then I wouldn't necessarily go down that road.
I think it's really important that you emphasized and articulated that because I think that that's also of part of my experience and why my IC experience didn't end positively is that that form of um, people connection, mentoring, whatever you want to call it, did not fill my cup.
And you know what?
This does.
I was
Having a weekly podcast that supports travel advisors in a similar yet very different way does fill my cup. And so I think that that's at the end of the day, I think that that's what you have to know about yourself is I hear so many people wanting to bring on ICs because of the money that they think that they're going to make.
such
And
a
I
mistake.
just cannot like scream loud enough to be like, this is not a money game. This is not, if you want to make more money, hire yourself a full-time assistant so that you can sell more. Full stop.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And I think when we talk about the IC bringing inherent value financially to the brand, that's 10 years down the road. That
It's
is
long term. Yeah.
10 months. Everything that my mom and I have done, and I think sometimes people look at us and they're like, holy cow, they're crazy. Are they even making money? And the answer is yes, marginally, but long term, everything we're doing is long term.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I would say you really have to be fulfilled by I mean, the tedious questions come. I love our whole team, please don't stop asking questions, but the tedious questions do come, and it does take time, and I do have to stop working on an itinerary to answer these
Yeah.
sort of questions, but at the
And
same time, I know that's gonna make their sales someday go faster, so it's worth it, but it's a long-term thing.
you have to be in such a mentality of the long game. And like this is the perfect segue to my next question is
Okay.
you started your business 4 or 5 years ago,
4 years, right
2019.
years now.
Um, was this always the plan? Like, was this always the vision of like sitting down and building a team, or did this come like because I'm really, really impressed with how many decisions you both make together that it's always with the end game or the long game in mind. Whereas I don't feel that I do that quite so naturally. My long game is like 12 months from now. You're talking like 10 or 15 years from now.
I think I would say this is where, like, if you ever go into business with someone, this is you can disagree on everything. Kristen and I disagree on a lot of stuff, but we never, ever once have disagreed on our long-term goal. And I think that's really important. And I honestly give credit to you, mom, because I think you having experience of being in business for 35, I don't even remember how many years now. You're at this point where you're talking about exit strategy with dad. And so to her credit, she's been saying to me since the beginning, we need to think about our exit strategy because it tells us where we're going. And I, in the beginning, being naive, was like, I don't ever want to hear the words exit strategy come out of your mouth for another 14 months because we're
Right.
just starting.
I mean, Kristen, talk to me about this a little bit because theoretically, I understand the approach of like, we need to know what direction we're heading. So, like, what's the finish line? What's the exit strategy? And then we can work back from there. But on the other end of things, when I look back at all of the things that have happened in my businesses over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, there have been so many twists and turns that I could have never seen coming that sometimes it feels like not a good use of time to try to figure out what the finish line looks like, but rather like, can we just look at like a 2 or a 3 year finish line, but it's not the exit strategy, because if we look at the finish line and then everything that happens in between changes so many times that that finish line at some point no longer makes sense, that's kind of like my mental pushback of like, is this a good exercise? But it's working for you guys. So I'm missing something. Talk me
Well,
through this.
when we talk exit strategy, I don't think that we've ever been specific. Like, okay, in 10 years, we want to put this business on the market to sell it. It's just kind of more of the direction. What are our goals? What do we want to do with this? Where do we want to go? And I guess the older I get, and I guess this would be advice to pass down, is that it happens quicker than you think. So you kind of have to understand a little bit about where you want to go. And yes, that path is going to meander and change, and things are going to happen that's going to take you in a totally different direction that you couldn't foresee. But at least you're on the path. At least you see there's a path in front of you rather than, no planning or no idea of where you're heading or what you want to do with your business at all.
I
So,
think I would add a very specific example of what she's saying because I know I'm thinking of it while she's talking.
Mhm.
When we first sat down and put our goals on paper, literally March 15th, 2020, we were in a branding and strategy session in DC. They said, you've put down you want to build something in 5 years, people want to join you. Who's joining you? And we wrote down we put down a financial planner, like someone coming onto our team and managing our finances. We don't have that position. That's not even in the realm of who we're hiring next. It's probably like number 5 on the list. The second thing we put down was a marketing person. So having someone full time, we were going to pay a full time marketing person. Obviously, that has not panned out. But if you're thinking about like almost like a tornado of like we're moving in this direction, and the goal then was build a team somebody wants to join in 5 years, and that's still the direction that we're moving in. But the people that we're bringing on board to get there have changed. And I think that's okay. That time thinking through a financial planner, that time thinking through a marketing strategy, full-time position, that wasn't time wasted because I've already thought through that. I know that's not what we're hiring. Now that we have almost 5 years of experience, 4.5, whatever, in the business, we know that those are not things that are going to generate sales for us personally. And so we're choosing to invest other places to continue to work towards that goal, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
But
I think it is a good, well, my brain's just kind of swimming a little bit because I've had my own struggles with this of like, I can totally understand why this is important. And I think that sometimes maybe I get too hung up on like the exit strategy. This is the plan. This is the deadline. And it's less about that and it's more about like the vision, what is important to you, what's going to keep you on track, how you're going to identify if you're starting to get off track of like, wait, that's a great idea, that's a great opportunity, but that is not connected to what we originally said that we were trying to do. So let's get back over here. So I think those kind of like guideposts maybe
yeah,
is
yeah.
like a good way to describe it. And I will also admit that now that I'm 8 years in, that this approach of mine is also not necessarily recommended or what works, because I have gotten to the point, like you said, Kristen, time goes by quicker than you think. And I've now gotten to the point that I'm 8 years in and I feel like I am still burning the candlestick at both ends. And I have had a few moments of like, what is all of this even for?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why am I working so hard all the time? Like, when I thought it would be easier by now, when does this get easier? When does this get more enjoyable? When do I just get to have like a normal life? And that is probably due a little bit to my always kind of looking like one step ahead or two steps ahead and never fully forcing myself to look 10 steps ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
think
I've been doing this alone since the beginning. So I don't have anyone kind of forcing me to think about that. So now
I
I'm
will
making
say
Kristen do it.
we
well,
have a deep, deep gratitude for the fact that we get to do this together because I hear this all the time from solopreneurs. Sorry about that. And it's hard when no one's challenging your perspective. The challenging conversations are difficult, don't get me wrong, but the fact that we're always having these like back and forths, I think is to our benefit. But Mom, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you going to
Oh,
say?
no, I was gonna say, I think you have to have the willingness, and sometimes Madeline pushes me a little bit more because I might not always be willing to just put the dream out there, to make the statement. In 5 years, I want to be making $5 million. In 5 years, I want to have a team of five. And in sitting here now, it's difficult to see how you could possibly get there. And it seems silly to say that because you don't know how you're going to get there. You don't know how you're going to make that happen. So how can you say you're going to make that happen? But just putting it out there, then your subconscious and your brain are, whether you realize or not, working towards that.
Mhm.
I will say
Yeah.
too, we've had opportunities or moments where like I hit like right before my maternity leave. I can't remember if we've talked about this before, where I was like, why am I spending so much time organizing a team? Like I can do this, but I don't enjoy it. It doesn't bring me fulfillment. And we had someone on our team who was like really naturally inclined towards it and was doing a good job. And so we sat down and we were like, we never intended ever in the last 5 years to hire a project manager. And if you told me even a year ago that we were going to hire someone who was going to fill a project manager role, I would have said, that's a crazy thing to hire for. I can just do that. But in having her do it,
Wait, we lost her.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
did I cut out?
Suddenly, oh, yeah, suddenly you cut out.
No,
So
no.
no, that's okay. So you were saying that you were like, wait, I could do that. But then you went in to say, but in having her do that, and then we lost you.
In having her do that, I've been able to sell more. And now I don't know how we ever functioned without her. Which is just interesting. I think you have to be open to like, oh, there's this position naturally forming within our team. Let's step into it. Let's foster it and cultivate it.
So I know exactly what like a coordinator or an assistant is supporting and like what they're doing, but this project manager position, I'm fascinated by this. So I think you shared with me previously that they are literally creating tasks for you on a daily basis of like today, this is what you have to do. Can you
Yeah,
tell me more about this? Because it sounds like a dream.
yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing, and I can't believe my ego prevented us from doing this sooner. But basically,
Well,
what
we're really good project managers. Like that's where our brains get excited.
it is, and also we're a little bit control freaks. I think I can label us both that way, and so really
Just a little bit.
that is difficult. So what our office coordinator does is she goes into our info box every day and she starts at the bottom, she works her way up and she says, okay, these 7 client facing things, they're going to be assigned to Maddie, to do. And she puts them on my Asana board. She opens up the client card. She writes the subtask. She assigns a deadline. She puts me down so it comes up on my to-do list. And then she goes to the next email. And these 6 emails are all about concierge items, which falls to Katie's pillar of operations. So she goes into the client cards, she opens them up, she assigns them, then she moves on to the next. Okay, these 4 supplier emails, Kristen handles supplier meetings. They're going to go on Kristen's board. And then she does a little like Slack update once Asana is complete. And she says, Maddie, your 7 things have been added. Katie, I want to flag these 6 things have been added. Kristen, these 4 things came through. And then she says, let me know if you need me to manage or alternate the deadlines. And basically, what's happened is no one's operating in a vacuum. Everybody has like view into what everyone else is doing. And I am showing her how I'm prioritizing things. And I'm also showing Katie how I prioritize things. So whether they
That's
know
interesting.
or not, they're learning how I work with clients and how I prioritize clients, which will eventually be a
Hmm.
skill that they need to do when they step into higher positions with more responsibility. So it's been
Interesting.
awesome. Like I didn't ever would have never hired for this, but she was just naturally kind of doing it on my mat leave.
Hmm.
And I was like, dang, she's really good at this. Do I even need to be doing this anymore? Then we got her strengths test results, and I forget what the exact phrasing was, but it was something like natural inclination towards taking like complex things and breaking them down into small achievable.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, there's a project manager in the making for sure.
Wow.
And the bottom line is that hour of time that it takes her to do that frees up time on 3 people's calendars. So to
Yeah.
do the things that they need to do to grow the business.
And if I'm being really honest, like postpartum is hard. It's really hard. And I don't have the same capacity brain wise that I did before.
Mhm.
I'm missing things. Like I'm making mistakes. So the fact that that level of detail and organization is falling to a brain that is not mine is really,
Mhm.
really good for me mentally and for the team.
So I think it was last summer that I had Mary Beth on about assistance and like having help in the inbox. And so since then, my assistant is going into my inbox every day and sorting into folders, but it's just between me and her. And then she gives me a recap in Slack of like, okay, here's the client work, like this is the status and all of this. That's in the client work folder. Here's like Whitney action stuff. And that might just be like business related things, not client work. So that's in that folder. And then she'll be like, these 3 things came in for me. And those are going to her folder. So I think we're doing something similar. And what I could take like one extra step is that she could actually go add them to my Asana and actually make them into tasks because I'm kind of then using her message as almost like my priority of like, okay, I need to do this, 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 you know what I mean? So she could actually take it one step further and we would get closer to what you've kind of described, which sounds incredible.
Thanks. We lucked upon it.
So I'm curious to know with all of this hiring, the 4 to 6 months ahead still baffles me a little bit. I don't feel like I feel real good about this yet. And I'm getting ready to do it. I'm
Yay.
getting ready to hire this summer with the hopes that myself and my assistant will be able to support that new person through the end of the year, for her to be full on 100% by, like wave season 2025. And I think my fear and scarcity mindset is business and revenue is good right now. Will enough new leads continue to come in to support like a full on third person? Um, and I just don't really, yes, there is a leap of faith for sure that there's nothing that's ever going to take that away. But I personally prefer like a leap of faith with the side of data or like
Mhm.
data with the side of leap of faith, if I'm being honest. And so I don't know if there is anything I can find in the data. I don't know if it's more about getting all like more and more and more off my plate to create space so that I can focus more on the marketing and the outreach and the networking and everything. I just don't have like a solid strategy to like, how do I make sure like not only that I'm not worried about business continuing to come in, I'm worried about like it needs to increase
Mhm.
to support this. So
What if you
Yeah.
look at the flip side? If you don't hire that person, then you head into wave season trying to grow your business, hoping your business grows, but not having the support to do that.
So here, and I was going to say something similar, but
you're
the
right.
the data part for us, and I'm happy to give you our data so it helps you with your little side of data, is we hired Katie, our sales were double the year before. We brought on
So
uh
everyone says this. Like, is this just like karma in the universe? Like, oh, Maddie has more time now. Send this one over to her.
well, kind of. I think there's something to be said for that. I also like no
I
all
do
kidding.
too, but
I also
I
think
mean,
like perfect example, if Maddie was not project managing us every day for 1 hour, that's 5 hours I now have for marketing, which generated, you saw, 1 hour of time spent on 3 posts, 6 leads. I can't I don't spend time tracking all this stuff, but when I look at small examples, I know if it's working on a small example or a small sample size, it has to be working on a larger size. So, I would say yes, that's your sample data, side of data that you were saying, but also I've made the mistake of bringing on not the right person and watched our sales drop from potential. So bringing someone on doesn't guarantee you doubling sales. It has to be the right fit. They have to have really clear guidelines of what it is that they're doing.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't know if I'm helping you other than to say the data is there to support it if you hire intentionally and correctly.
And also it goes back to my saying that you're pulling all those weeds, you're clearing the space for those flowers to grow.
I know this is how we ended the last conversation.
I'm trying to think of
So
other data points we could give you. I'll think
have
of one.
you well, I think you have to look at your outreach and marketing efforts, but what I feel far more confident and comfortable with is pouring back into my current clients. So
Mhm.
pouring back into my really great referral sources. I did something this week that I've never done before, and this is just simply due to a lack of time. And I thought to myself, I should always be doing this, but I did it because of my upcoming maternity leave. And I was like, this shouldn't be a maternity leave thing. But I had 6 trips. I think 4 or 5 of them were repeat clients. So like people that I know pretty well. And then one was or two, yeah, it was two that are new leads. So they're referrals. So they're not like total strangers, but I have never planned a trip for them. And they have reached out to me in the last 60 to 90 days to plan a trip. And then it just never moved forward. So it was for all different reasons. I know the reasons for most of them. Some of them were, really good personal health kind of reasons, and others were like, we just haven't gotten around to responding to you. Usually I'm so busy that I just let it go. Like if you're not going to fill out a form or schedule a call or like I'm not going to like force this. And I just let it go. And I often forget about them. But this time I had them on the list for whatever reason. And I just thought, I know these people and they don't know that I'm pregnant. And so if they reach out to me in April, still wanting to travel in the fall, like they originally told me, I'm going to feel really bad that I have to say no and that I can't help them. And so I need to tell them now, like I will be planning trips for another 4 weeks. Like if you are thinking I still want to do that trip and I just haven't reached out to Whitney yet, we need to do it now. And so I sent that email just to simply say, like, this is what it is. And within 24 hours, 3 responded and said, like, oh yeah, we do want to do this. And so now I have 3 and hopefully a few more by the end of the week, like trips that have calls scheduled and that I'll be planning and working on that weren't there last week. And that's simply because I took an hour to send
Mhm.
6 emails.
Whitney, we need to do some co-working sessions because we are on the same wavelength. I also did something very similar for the first time this past week where I have a on our pipeline in Travel Joy, a whole bucket that just says holding that I have never like you when I don't hear back, I put them there and it grows to like 15 and then I'm like, let's just archive a bunch of these and move on.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that is a whole bucket of sales that I'm not tapping into that I absolutely should.
Right.
And my thing that I did that was just slightly different was trips that I loved working on, clients I loved working with last year. There were 6 or 7 of them, and I hadn't heard from them this year. And I just sent them a
Mm.
note. And I just said, I loved working on your trip. You have anything in the pipeline for this year? I'd love to work with you again. And they all got back. I mean, it took a couple days, but it was just interesting. I was like, I've never done this, but I have
Me
time to
neither. Yeah.
now. And this
Yeah.
is why we hired because that energy and time spent on
Yeah.
sales is that's where you get your data to your point. So good on you. Now you're motivating me to go unarchive all 10 of those.
Um, so I guess my biggest question for you is, have you ever hired 4 to 6 months early and it financially became a challenge? Like that the revenue didn't grow or whatever needed to happen to like really support that person, like that it became
It did.
cumbersome.
It did last year. And we had a mutual agreement with this person that they could go and maybe start their own business or move into the industry in a different way that wasn't aligned with our team and wished them the best. And I attribute to that not being that we financially couldn't support that position. we could and we could continue, we weren't seeing the ROI. So it
Okay.
was, my hours had gone up, Katie's hours had gone up. And even though the revenue was there to continue to pay for that position, it wasn't an investment that was smart anymore. And so when that
Okay.
happens, that's a little bit of a different conversation than like, we can't make payroll,
Right.
which I would say right now, we brought 2 people on at the end of January, knowing full well February, March, and April are our lowest grossing months because a lot of times we have to chase for festive bookings. We haven't had our spring break travel yet. Our biggest month is in September, almost always. I don't know why. And so when we hired, we knew it was going to be tight. And so I think you do have to know your trends to some degree so that you can financially plan, so you know how
Hmm.
much planning fees to bring on. But I think
Right.
there's something to be said for, even if you have the money, if it's no longer a smart investment that's generating an ROI for your
Yeah.
company, you have to get rid of that position, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So I've taken up far too much of both of your time, but I do have one final question for you. For anyone who hasn't yet built a team, or if they're unsure if they really want to, or they're trying, like they're moving in that direction, what do you feel are some defining advantages and disadvantages to the business model that you've set up? That, like, any insights through your learning experience that you might share briefly with someone who's on this journey?
Mom, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you can go first.
I think if you want to grow a team, you have to reconcile that if you are desiring to make a lot of money very quickly, this industry already lends itself to that being very difficult. Building a team like triples that. So I
Triples the difficulty.
triples the difficulty. I mean, it is very difficult to look at a payroll statement and know that you made maybe the same or slightly more than the people on your staff. So if you have, your worth is tied to how much money you make, or you care deeply about what you're bringing in for your family and that sort of thing, growing a team is not for you. If you love building a company culture, if you love setting long-term big scary goals that you want to go out and achieve, and you want to be able to step away from the business someday, maybe getting your time back, collecting a number, a set number, but you get most of your time back. If you're motivated that way, then a company model, a team model is a fantastic model for you. But I think the biggest thing is, like, you have to be able to reconcile you are not making a ton of money next year, and looking at statements and seeing that in your face. It's very hard. But for me, it's worth it because that's how I'm motivated. Mom, what do you think?
I also think building a team, you have to really trust yourself and trust that the decisions you're making will are for the benefit of the long term, that will work out in the end. But also trust that if you see things starting to go maybe a little off the rails, or you're not happy with the direction that you're going, that you're making the good decision, and that maybe cutting those ties or moving in a different direction will work out for you as well. Like, you always have to be in tune with, is this working for me? Am I happy with this? Am I happy with these decisions? Is it really building the business that I want to build? Is it reaching the goals that I want to reach? And if it's not, being willing to say, okay, I need to course correct here. I need to change my direction, and trusting yourself to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, this has been eye-opening for me because while it doesn't come naturally to me, you almost have to be able to see a little bit of the long end game so that when you say, I want to build a team, that you can make sure that that is aligned with that end game. Whereas what I did and what I see a lot of advisors doing is, well, my next, if I'm looking one or two steps ahead, is XYZ and I want to make more money. Therefore, I'm going to grow a team. It's like,
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
over, try again. Like that's not what's going to happen here. And it's about the financials, but it's also about so much more than that.
Mhm.
Um, and that's why I think I see a lot of people kind of go down that route, but then it's challenging and it's a struggle. And that's because they weren't looking like far enough ahead in terms of like why they were doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
Maddie and Kristen, thank you both for joining me today on this topic, for sharing so much openly and honestly about your business growth and expansion. And even though your constant growth terrifies me, I'm always cheering you on. I'm always so happy for you, and just like watching from the sidelines, like, yeah, I'm proud.
You're the
Thank you.
best. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate it.